Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Darren Brazil. I am joined with Brian Altano.
Hello.
And Sean Finnegan.
How's it going, everyone?
And happy April Fools. And we're here taking a look at IGN's April Fools video. We put this out the other day, and it is a Back to the Future new movie teaser trailer, but it's got a little twist to it.
That's right. The dust has finally settled on this. You've watched this. You've reacted. Maybe you were angry. Maybe you were sad. Maybe you were hopeful that something like this will get made someday. And maybe something like this will get made someday thanks to us. But today we're going to talk about how we actually put this thing together.
Yeah, so one of the cool things about this is the fire effects. These are practical, meaning we drove out to Pleasanton, California. We spoke with mall managers so that we could shoot on their property, and we lit their parking lot on fire.
And
essentially.
Not to mention, the underneath this, you hear Dave Fennoy's voiceover. Which thank you very much, Dave Fennoy, for lending your voice to this. It's beautiful. And yeah, I mean,
it's Lee from The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Yes, and
video game.
We had the debate in our creative meeting before this, right, about how we were going to do the fire, whether it be practical, whether it be CG. I think we all said CG at first, but Sean, you were adamant.
Yeah, I mean, I have shot many projects. Some of them have had fire effects, and I knew that fire looks great on camera, and it's not something that, like, because it's random and because it's like a chemical effect, it's not something that can be easily replicated with CGI. And knowing the shot that I wanted to achieve, which was this close-up, long kind of one-shot dolly move, I just didn't think that we would be able to do CGI convincingly. And so this is real fire. We had a pyrotechnics expert out there on set who kind of helped us create the size and the color and the duration of the fire, and it was actually really quite an experience.
So now fire is like, it's one of the hardest things to fake, right? It's sort of like, for like a painter, it's like painting an egg.
Yeah,
it's impossible.
And it's because, like, it's hard to really, in a computer, generate the randomness that fire has because of its interaction with the air and the atmosphere around it. It's just something that it's really difficult, according to most CGI and animation experts, to get just looking natural. Because, like, you know it when you see it, oh, that's real fire. Yeah. But to recreate it in a computer, you can do everything that looks right, but then when you play it back, it just isn't right.
I know Easter is near, but how many eggs have you painted, Brian?
I mean, I went to art school, so I had to paint a lot of eggs. It was difficult.
Speaking of practical, Adam Barenblatt, he's actually our motion graphics producer here at IGN, but he practically made a recreation of this California license plate out of time. You can't even down to the details, right, of the registration, 1986, as the proper year registration for the movie that came out in 1985. Amazing. He burnt it. He added some scruff to it. He even bent it in the same ways that it's bent in the movie. And last but not least, we dipped it in liquid nitrogen to give it that smoky steam.
Which is really awesome. I actually didn't notice that the first few times I screened this that there is that steam coming off of it. It's awesome. It's really cool. It's a really cool effect.
If you remember in the movie, after the time machine time travels, the DeLorean's license plate falls off and it spins and hits the ground, and Marty picks it up and it's freezing cold.
Yep.
And that's one of the effects that we wanted to kind of recreate here. So yeah, as Darren pointed out, we dipped it in liquid nitrogen, and then we also have it sitting on top of dry ice that we doused in water, so that just gives it that smoky effect.
So this would have just been like the worst thing to touch.
Yeah.
Is it okay having liquid nitrogen that close to fire?
We don't know.
So we asked the pyrotechnics expert. We were like, "Is this cool?" And he was like, "I don't see why not. They should cancel each other out, right?" And we were like, "Sure.
One's cold, one's hot. Yeah. I'm a pyrotechnics expert."
Needless to say, nobody got burned nor frozen.
Yeah.
So
which is a success.
Let's talk about that real quick. You guys had to actually book. Did you have to rent this parking lot and then get a pyrotechnics expert? Like, you can't just go lighting a parking lot on fire,
don't
right?
do this at home.
So whenever you're doing any sort of fire stunt in public, like, you need to have the approval of the city's fire marshal.
Otherwise,
which
you go to jail.
Is a big, and this is even, it was even easier for us because this happens to be, it is a mall, but it happens to be private property, meaning it's privately owned.
Yeah.
So it's easier to deal with people in that regard. If it was public space, then you'd have to be dealing with the city and stuff, and that makes it even harder. So this is why we chose to do it outside of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of public space, let's move into now what I would say is the reveal, right?
Yeah.
Everyone thought they're getting a Back to the Future movie. You are, but it's a little different. So what we're looking at here is Tokyo, but not just any Tokyo. We're looking at a Tokyo from the scene of the movie Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift.
Yeah, and to back up real quick, like this, the way this actually came together was every year IGN does a really big April Fool's Day video. This year we had a meeting where we basically brought everybody together to pitch ideas, and there's no bad ideas in the meeting. I mean, there are, But
a lot of bad ideas.
You don't tell anyone that.
But we
when
don't
they walk
veto
in.
the idea immediately.
You don't poo-poo as
What
they
are some
say.
of the other ones we had, right?
So, God, what else?
In regards to this, right? Because we kind of actually nailed down. Let's not give away all our ideas, but we nailed down. We wanted to do a Back to the Future Part 4 trailer.
You guys
so
came in with like basically napkin sketches, right?
Napkin sketches.
Well, it was great because you
next
came
Facebook.
in like the most of the creative for this idea was locked in the moment you guys pitched it, which was it was a fake trailer. It was the flaming trails on blacktop concrete, and then it ended with the license plate spinning and it says out of time or whatever. It
Very
was.
straightforward.
That was the idea. That's what it was at its core. And then it evolved, and kind of during the duration of that meeting, I think people started throwing out ideas about like what else could happen there at the end. Like originally we had the idea of a DeLorean like an actual DeLorean that we'd go and rent, popping into frame, and then someone gets out of it.
Yeah,
and
we had a lot of different ideas of who got
like
out
we
of
toyed
it.
like because Star Wars is so big, we thought like maybe Luke Skywalker gets out of it, and because
Spider-Man has
we thought Spidey gets out.
like it quickly got very meta, and then I think after the meeting, the kind of key creative people got in a room and sat down, and we were like, okay, these are all good. We know we want something to kind of be the stinger after that flaming trail shot. What can it be? And we came up with this, which is that it ties together with Fast and Furious very well, which you guys know. Furious 7 releases 2 days. In 2 days.
Yeah.
Or
depending
on when you're
whenever you're seeing this.
April 1st.
Whenever
It's big right now.
It's
big right now.
which is very close to when we dropped the video, and so we thought, hey, maybe it's a Fast and Furious crossover.
So boom.
We had this footage of Tokyo Drift where you see the car actually drifting through Shibuya. Now, this is one of the most iconic crosswalks in the world. I was actually here last year. Darren, you were here the year before.
Yep.
Sean, you've been here too, right?
Yes.
This is one of those, like, it's in Lost in Translations. It's incredibly iconic. There's always people crossing the street, and the way this car parts the crowd, we kind of like, one of us identified as this is the shot. This is where we want to comp in the DeLorean.
I think this was actually Darren who pointed this out, but
it seemed so cool, right, for it to come into this environment that we could really manipulate and really change. And it's what's cool about this is there's actually 3 street racing cars that were in the shot originally, comped out, they're gone. Right, we've added the DeLorean that comes bursting in, and then.
So now, who did the brunt of that work?
So a wizard named Matt Gravish, who
wizard.
worked at IGN for 3 years and is now freelancing on his own. But we contracted him in. We, very close collaborator and friend. He's responsible for a lot of the IGN videos that have super high amounts of polish. The one you may be familiar with was last year's April Fool's video, Optimus Prime and Titanfall.
That's right.
That was a Mike Horn and Matt Gravish joint, who we both worked with on this project as well. He's the one who did the modeling, put the DeLorean in there, lit it up, like did the flaming effects and the smoke effects that you see coming off the back of the tires, and did the motion tracking and capture and all that stuff.
So what I love about this shot is that Japan inherently looks futuristic, but there's a lot added here that even makes it more Back to the Future, even more than I originally had thought. I've seen this a bunch of times now, and every time I pick up something else. So what are some details that we sort of snuck in here?
If we start all the way to the left, you'll see a small white ad with a man's face on it, and that is Goldie for mayor. So if you remember from the original Back to the Future, Goldie ran for mayor, right?
Yep.
And that was his ad campaign, so that's in there. Immediately to the right of that, you see a circular black logo with those like crosses, white lines, right?
Yep. Underneath where it says Series N.
Yep. There's no name on that, but that is the Mr. Fusion logo.
Yeah.
Right. So super cool there. And then above that, you said Series N, right? If we actually go back a little bit, Cubs take Series in 5,
which is a Back to the Future 2 joke.
Back to the Future 2 joke, right? Cubs win the series. Next to that, keep going to the right, you'll see a hoverboard ad.
Which is awesome.
For Mattel's hoverboard, which is awesome.
You can't make a Back to the Future thing without mentioning the hoverboard.
You gotta,
and in fact, we wanted to try and get the hoverboard in this somehow, right?
Well, we have,
a guy stepping out of the DeLorean
and the hoverboard dropping down.
As some of you may know, we do have a lot of random toys and props, and one of those toys and props here in the office is that hoverboard. So we were like, how can we get this in there? But, it eventually didn't make it in as a prop, so we had it here.
Keep going to the right, and what's funny about the alleyways, I feel like I've sang karaoke down that alleyway before, but there's a Cafe 80 small sign you'll see there next to the hoverboard.
Yeah, right next to the hoverboard
just sticking
sign.
out. I hope they're playing Beat It by Michael Jackson there. Best scene in that movie. Keep going to the right, and this is the obvious one, right? Biff's Pleasure Palace. So this is the old clock tower, which you see sitting behind it, right? Where in the alternate 1984, I'm sorry, alternate 1985, Biff turns it into his big casino, right?
Yep.
So we had that still existing there. And then keep going all the way to the right, you'll see Jaws in 3D. Jaws 19,
Jaws 19
I believe it is,
in 3D.
right?
Jaws 19, yeah, which was
And
a reference to
Back to the
the
Future 2.
scene in Back to the Future 2 where Marty McFly looks up and sees the Jaws sign and it comes out in 3D towards his face and it's terrifying. And it's
Which
really
is-
goofy looking.
It is really goofy
Super
looking. That's why I wanted it to be like. I'm glad someone pushed me back on this because I wanted it to be huge. Like I wanted that shark to be enormous, like
Yeah.
just basically the size of the frame, like as tall as the frame. And everyone was like, if that's the case, you'll just be looking at the shark and not the
Shark and
DeLorean.
Yeah.
And I was like,
made
that's
the
so
fu-
true.
Somebody
But
made the funny joke though that it actually isn't going to be Jaws 19 that would be in the future, but at this point it probably would actually be Fast and Furious 19.
that's so true.
right. Will be the movie that we see 20
Yep.
years from now, right? So we keep going to the next shot. You see again, Biff's Pleasure Palace still kind of.
Now, this is a
Taking
shot, you actually see the car in the original Tokyo Drift footage,
Yep.
but here the blue lights were added to it and that sort of rectangular
Well,
rearview mirror,
we
right?
comped over where that car sits, like with that
Yeah.
DeLorean skin, right? So you still have the DeLorean drifting through, and then we get into the next shot, and this is now
Our first reveal of
The
the
first
main
reveal
character.
of our lead character of the movie that we're dubbing Fast to the Future,
Yeah.
which we'll
Yeah.
get to later.
Which is actually a joke we came up in the room
Yeah.
when we were pitching the idea to begin with, because I think we talked about doing the Back to the Future stuff, and we wanted to do something Fast and the Furious,
Yep.
and I think just naturally they joined forces on the fly.
Well, I think we even struggled between Fast to the Future or Back to the Furious.
Back to the Furious.
Those are the two
yeah.
titles we had, and they just I think
Or
that's,
Two Back to Future.
Yeah, Two Back
There's
to
a lot of ways it can go.
But here we have Vin Diesel. This is actually a scene from Fast 6. Where he's street racing against Michelle Rodriguez.
Yep.
It fits in with the movement he's doing here in the car, right? The drifting sequence here. It just
And I think we were worried too. God, it looks so good. We were worried too that people were going to be able to pinpoint actual moments. And I think that because the way it all comes together, and because it's really hard to identify the exact second where Vin Diesel's driving a car in
Right.
any of those 7 movies, I think it just works.
It
you know?
does. And the other thing is, like, we've adjusted the frame a little bit. Like, if you freeze on this frame in Tokyo or in Fast 6, which is where this shot is from,
Yeah.
the shot is wider than it is here. What we've done is kind of punch in the frame, and that's just because you can, in the wider shot, it's so easy to tell he's not
Yeah.
in a DeLorean.
Yeah.
The great irony around all this is that 88 miles an hour in the Fast and the Future or Fast and the Furious world is not that fast.
Right.
no. We imagine them time traveling a lot,
Which
Yeah.
is why,
Yeah.
honestly, that's why I had the DeLorean lit up the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is because to me it was always time traveling, even if it wasn't actually jumping time.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Like it was
It's-
always in that mode.
You're catching it right there. Like you're just actually seeing that scene.
And we had fun with that too, right? We talked about, what other time periods could they be traveling
Yeah.
to, right? Should we have them jump between like
Right.
5 different ones in a super quick sequence?
Which
'Cause
is really
that's-
interesting. At one point, Darren and I had pitched, and Darren actually got up and drew the scene, which was you see the logo,
horrible.
and all of a sudden the DeLorean shoots past basically what is dinosaur world, right?
Yeah,
Like
5 moons in the sky.
5 moons in the sky. This
T-Rex
is
lifting its head up, growling.
he
and
growls,
roaring.
and then one joke we actually wrote that I'm so glad we scrapped because we went in such a serious direction. Said was that you hear the DeLorean fly into a pile of
Poop.
dinosaur poop, and you hear someone go manure. I hate manure, which is it's a Back to the Future joke, but it's also kind of a deep cut. And then we thought about we're gonna have to have volcanoes and a dinosaur, and there's just so much more moving parts there.
Yeah, on the timeline that we had, it just wasn't
Yeah.
feasible to do that. We had a lot of great ideas, but I think what we ended up coming up with was both cool to look at and focused.
So
Yeah.
if you keep going here, right, it's drifting through the intersection, and then boom, we hit this shot. And there actually are a couple more Easter eggs in this shot too, right? If you look to the far right, we'll start there. That white and red ad is actually the company that sends the fax to him that he's fired.
Yeah.
In Back to the Future
In
too,
Back to the
yeah.
Future too.
What are they called? Fusco?
I think
Cusco or
It's hard to
something?
see.
Yeah.
Even on
Cusco?
I think it's
even
Cusco.
even if you go back to the
Yeah,
movie and try and
it's
look at the
difficult.
logo, it's hard to read.
In
on
fact,
the
I
paper.
even need to talk to our motion graphic artist to figure out where he figured out that if
Yeah.
he recreated or what, because it's amazing that he got something that big. And then second of all is the Pepsi Perfect futuristic Pepsi bottle
Yep.
that
Yeah.
you can order in
Yep.
the cafe.
Which I would go as far as saying that Pepsi bottle is now iconic because of Back to the Future.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Like that design is straight out of that movie and only that movie.
Did they ever make a real one of those when the movie came
don't
out?
know.
I
I
feel
don't
like they
think
should
so.
have.
Oh, they should have.
They made a
definitely.
bunch of stuff. Like they made the shoe that doesn't actually lace itself, and they made
Yeah.
the hoverboard that doesn't actually fly. So I wouldn't be surprised if they made this Pepsi bottle.
And secondly, that backdrop is not Tokyo. If you're familiar with the Tokyo skyline, we just added some more futuristic-looking buildings back there.
You've got basically a hybrid Space Needle and then a couple Transamerica buildings from San Francisco.
Oh, yeah,
a couple of them, because
Those
one's not
buildings are
enough.
not there.
The interesting thing is people asked us, they're like, what is this? Is this the future? Is this now? What is it?
It's supposed to be near future.
And it's near future. It's an alternate near future,
Yeah.
right? it's something that if you mash these two timelines together, that's what it would be, right? And actually, we have to envision what this entire movie would have been when we were making this trailer. And so my thing was always a crazy mad scientist of some sort, maybe an even older Doc Brown, comes to Vin Diesel and says, you've made a lot of mistakes, right? If you listened to the VO earlier, you've made a lot of mistakes, but you can fix them, right? And you could change them, and you can make the future better. And Vin now has to get behind the car that defined the 80s in order to define his future. That was my little tagline, right? I thought that was funny.
We did have a lot of story discussion for what is ostensibly no story at all in this video, because
like movie that does not exist.
It's world building, right? The circle gets bigger and bigger the more we talked about it. So.
Yeah, and I want to admire really quickly how good the model actually looks. Like Gravish did such an incredible job putting this model in the world. Like it looks like it's there. It looks like it's driving along.
Yeah, it really does.
The weight looks good, and obviously this is Rewind Theater. We don't have the sound to go with it as much. But go watch
the sound design helps a lot.
Sound design was amazing by Mike Horn.
Amazing work by Mike Horn.
I love these lights that sort of dip across his face.
Oh,
I don't know if they were actually there to
They're
begin
not.
with.
So this is what is called an anamorphic flare, and it's now been popularized as the J.J. Abrams effect because he did it so often in Star Wars, Star Trek, and Super 8. This is something we added in post. Anamorphic flares, to me, they're just beautiful. And honestly, if you don't overuse them and they're motivated by light, so the reason we put it in here is if you listen to the sound design, this is when the flux capacitor is activating. And based on the layout of the DeLorean, you know the flux capacitor to be in between the passenger seat and the driver's seat on the back. And so when you hear that and you see this anamorphic flare, it kind of gives you that sense that the DeLorean's about to jump away again.
And the line that Vin says here is just like old times.
Yeah.
My horrible Vin impression.
Which
is great.
But he said like basically in every Fast and Furious movie,
it's a legit
at least
line
once.
from Fast 6 that we added in that just is perfect. It fits so well, right? Keeps driving, hits the gears, activates time travel, shoots off into who knows where.
Now this shot, originally this street was covered in cars, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, he's originally 3 cars were street racing. There were cars coming the opposite direction. We got rid of all of them so you could focus more on the DeLorean.
And Darren, you had pointed out that originally, based on the Tokyo Drift footage, that this is actually a street shot from L.A.
It's probably downtown L.A. Let's be honest. Right?
That they comped in.
If you look at the roads,
shots
right?
of Shibuya in the distance.
Yeah, the double yellow line, like all that stuff, is not what you see on a Tokyo street. Like, that's an American street, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably just a shot from downtown LA that they shot that scene on and then comped in their own Tokyo. So yeah, definitely not.
And if you
real.
What's really cool about this is like we had planned to do a lot of extra work in terms of like laying in Easter eggs and stuff to this shot, similar to last shots. But we didn't actually, because when we looked at it, like the frame got too busy and it's already very vibrant and colorful and kind of, just a pretty shot on its own, so we didn't end up doing too much work.
I think I had pitched that we put a bunch of blimps in the top.
Yeah,
because to me, blimps were always alternate dimensional future.
No, I remember very early on you said, you know how you make something futuristic? Blimps. And I was like, that's so true, dude. Think of Blade Runner. There's that blimp flying around.
Which is so weird. I was like, let's take this old way of travel that was horrible.
But I do like that the story that Back to the Future creates inherently makes a backstory like this plausible, because it's not just the future. There are alternate timelines. There is Biff got the almanac and everything's corrupt. There is futuristic Jaws sequels that we never saw. Like, it's really cool. So it really leaves you open to do stuff like this.
The attention to detail that the filmmakers had in making the movies Back to the Future really lends itself to that sort of creativity. It's like, now you can really kind of dig into, well, if they did it in this movie this way, then we can do it in our thing a different way, and it makes it just interesting.
And coming out of this sequence too, just real quick, we have obviously the title, which we said earlier, Fast to the Future. Beautiful title sequence.
Which this logo work is perfect. I love the way this came out. This was Adam
Barenblatt.
Adam Barenblatt, our motion graphics producer.
Nailed it with this.
Blair Kelly also helped with stuff on this video.
The unsung hero of this whole thing is Blair. I mean, Blair
produced the shoot.
He produced everything on this,
and
he's doing a lot of stuff for us
at
IGN now, for IGN Originals. And yeah, I think what we never really wanted to piss anybody off with this. We didn't want to trick people, but we did want to make something that was both awesome for Back to the Future fans and awesome for Fast and the Furious
because we're fans of both. We talk about Fast and Furious all the time in the office, and honestly, we wanted to make a Back to the Future Part 4 trailer. That was the original pitch, because we want to see that movie. And I know everybody doesn't like remakes and things like that and reboots, but done in the right way somehow, right? We would love to see an extension, that universe continue.
And we had a lot of Back to the Future purists in the office that were like, how dare you cross it with Fast and the Furious?
We were pissing off a lot of people.
Mike Oransky.
Mike Oransky specifically, a producer
calling
here.
you out, man.
And I think the end result is something that everyone can kind of be happy as just like probably one of the most blown out pieces of fan art that you can possibly make.
Yes.
I like to think of it like that, like fan art.
Yeah.
And the last little nod here too, right? The release date of the film.
Yep.
10/21/2015. Anybody know the?
It's the anniversary.
No, it's the date he goes to the future.
That's right.
The date they go to the future, right? Is 10/21/2015.
It's your kids, Marty.
It's your kids. So that was just the last little nod to the franchise, and of course, hashtag Fast to the Future. Why not?
Yep.
Gotta have a hashtag this day and age, right?
Yeah, there was some debate as to like, all right, if we're gonna do the hashtag, what is the how far do we go, right? Like I thought, okay, well, do we create the Facebook page? Do we create a Twitter? And do we have those on the same title card? Because in a movie, if you're going to have a hashtag, at the bottom you'll also see like a Facebook logo / Fast and Furious or whatever it ends up being. So I was like, do we commit and like make the whole social thing part of the joke? And in the end, we were just like, no, just make it clean and nice and have the hashtag.
But in the end, we had a blast making it. It was fun to do the mix of super practical with super CG and post-end stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think any of us ever want to hear the Back to the Future theme song.
No, never again.
Oh, nope, I can always hear it. That moment makes me smile every time.
Yep.
I'm just such a huge fan of the score and the movies in general. But, Dave Fennoy's voice was always the voice I heard doing... when I wrote the VO, it was... I wrote it with Vin Diesel's voice in my head. And I was like, well, I can't get Vin Diesel, so who is the next best person? And immediately Dave Fennoy's voice came to mind. Not that he's next best, but he's the best in the business when it comes to VO.
Yeah,
and
he's amazing.
His VO adds so much to this.
But it was a joy to work on. I enjoyed working with you guys. And honestly, it was such a collaborative effort here at IGN. I mean, we sat here in post, and we were editing it and making 7, 8, 9 screeners of it, and all the time people would walk over, and it got annoying. They'd walk over and give their feedback, but every time someone gave their feedback, it was a great piece of feedback.
Yeah, we'd get a little bit closer.
And we'd always implement something from what somebody said, so I feel like this came together as such a team effort. And big thanks to everybody who was involved. We don't have time, obviously, to list every single name, and we hope you enjoyed it. We hope that you guys realize that we're just a huge fan of both franchises.
Yeah.
That's why we wanted to do this. That's pretty much it. We hope you enjoyed it. Happy April Fools.
Yeah, ironically, we take April Fools very seriously
Very
at IGN.
seriously.
Yeah.
So we hope to keep making these for years to come, and maybe even more stuff like this in between the Aprils throughout the year.
And if you really like the video, share with all your
June
friends,
Fools.
because that way we can make more of them.
That's right.
Absolutely. So for Sean Finnegan, for Brian Altano, I'm Darren Brazil, and for more Fast to the Future, keep it locked to IGN.